VO₂ Max is probably the most important health marker. It's the health marker with the strongest correlation to life expectancy. That happens in the cells, specifically in your mitochondria.
VO₂ Max is so important for health and longevity. If people aren't doing something about it, it declines by around 10 to 12% per decade between 30 and 50.
If you improve your mitochondrial health, that is something that has a profound impact on all your systems.
If you want to be able to hike in the hills, you need to have a VO₂ max of 30 mils per kilo per minute. The trajectory for someone who isn't exercising and paying attention to this, unfortunately, they've lost that capacity at 70.
High intensity training has a more robust effect on mitochondrial efficiency. Researchers have found is that in only 8 weeks doing this exercise 3 times a week, that you can reduce your risk of developing metabolic diseases by.
Ulrich, welcome back to the show. So great to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
I'm really excited. We've got some new updates to talk about, but also I think that diving into just how important VO₂ Max is for health and longevity here and going into the science. But as you and I have been talking about offline, just how many benefits there are to optimizing your cardiorespiratory fitness in the way we're going to talk about for brain health optimization, performance at work. And I just love everything about that intersection of performance and longevity. So yeah, great to have you here today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's start with explaining VO₂ Max. It's so important. On average, if people aren't doing something about it, it declines by around 10 to 12% per decade between 30 and 50, and then more so after that. Should we start with just people understanding what is VO₂ Max?
Yeah, sure. So VO₂ Max is your ability to burn, to metabolize oxygen during exercise. And VO₂ Max, it's then your maximum ability to metabolize oxygen. And to get a good VO₂ Max, you really have to have many different ingredients in place. So it's a big health marker. It's probably the most important health marker. It's the health marker with the strongest correlation to life expectancy. What are all the systems that you need to have to work at optimal capacity to get to your optimal VO₂ Max? And there's 2 sides to it. So there's oxygen delivery. That is how strong are your lungs? Can they extract the oxygen from the air? How strong is your heart? Can it powerfully pump lots of blood through your circulatory system? Your blood plasma levels, your muscle capillarization. Do you have the blood vessels to deliver all the oxygen? So that's one side of the equation of VO₂ Max, oxygen delivery. And then the other side of the equation is oxygen consumption. And that happens in the cells and specifically in your mitochondria. So mitochondria are the little powerhouses in your cells that essentially burn oxygen and create ATP, the little molecule substance that provides energy for all our cells. And therefore, if you improve your mitochondrial health, your mitochondrial function, that is something that provides, literally energy for life and has a profound impact on your entire body, all your systems. And so therefore, that explains a bit just why VO₂ Max is or the most important health marker, and why it has the strongest predictive quality for life expectancy.
And as you say, it's tightly linked to our mitochondrial health, which are linked to our energy. So when we think about often in midlife, for example, we've got lowered energy. It's to do with those little battery packs in our cells. I want to come back to mitochondria. When we're looking at VO₂ Max, just to put it in context as well, I think maybe people don't see the forward of what's happening. So, for example, I think it's the right figure, if I have it, is that if you want to be able to hike in the hills, you need to have a VO2 max of 30 mils per kilo per minute. And when you actually look at the graphs in the scientific literature to see what is the trajectory for someone who isn't exercising and paying attention to this, unfortunately, they've lost that capacity at 70. So it's linked obviously to independence as well and everything you can do, but also just sheer enjoyment. If you travel and you want to be able to do some of these things, it's so important for longevity. Just to kind of contextualize it for people. I think when people think of VO2 max, though, what they associate that with then is endurance, and where am I going to find the time to optimize, my fitness routine around that. And we hear a lot about hours of zone 2 training. What you're going to share with us today is the science around the fact that actually, I think it's something like from Martin Gabala's research, 41% of people are non-responders to zone 2. Can you explain a bit more around that?
Yeah, sure. So zone 2 has gained a lot of attention, a lot of traction. It's become a very popular concept, but it probably lacks, or it lacks to some extent the scientific evidence behind it. And some of the recommendations around zone 2 training, they may be great for elite athletes, but are actually not an optimal prescription for the general public. So in zone 2 training, you'd want to stay at a level of intensity. So if you want to be really precise, where you're at your ventilatory threshold or your first lactate threshold. And in kind of easier terms, it's where you can still hold a conversation while you work out. So you can talk but not sing, and some people give advice around what percentage of your maximum heart rate you should be working at, and it varies a lot. Some people say like 60 to 70, others say 70 to 80%. But generally, it's a lower intensity workout that is recommended to do for much longer periods of time, 60 to 90 minutes, and then ideally 4 to 5 times a week. So then you'd suddenly be like 5 to 8 hours per week, zone 2 training. That's very difficult for most people. Even if it's low intensity, by that time, if you spend that much time jogging or spend that much time in a bike seat, at least your behind hurts, yeah? And then what's really problematic is that research shows if you did only that, and if you took basically some of that popular narrative and said like, yes, zone 2, that's the top priority, and I'm really going to focus on that, that 40% of people who do this low to moderate intensity exercise, even for like 2.5 hours per week, will not see an improvement in their VO2 max. So will not respond to that. And that's for spending that much time is, in our view, just not, it's just not good advice to the general public. In defense of the people who are big proponents of zone 2 training, they would, of course, say, yeah, well, you also have to do high intensity training and you have to have a rounded program. But the problem is most people can't do it all. If you objectively measure, it's less than 5% of the population get the recommended amounts of cardio exercise. So that's 2.5 hours of moderate intensity workouts. If you survey them, it's more, but if you objectively measure with wearable devices, it's really very little. And so then giving a recommendation that you should do 5 to 8 hours of low intensity workout, and you can't even be sure that it works for you, is questionable advice.
I think the difficulty as well is that we also have to, the next biggest predictor of longevity, right, is your muscle strength, and then you need good muscle mass. So now for insulin sensitivity as well, and things like that. And so then we've got to come on to, well, how am I going to fit that in? And then on top of that, as you get fitter, you might think, well, actually, like I love lifting weights and things and doing high intensity, and then I'll go for walks, which is really lovely and, very good for blood flow. but that's not actually really producing strong effects in terms of optimizing mitochondrial turnover and mitochondrial biogenesis, because now it's like, well, it's too low a heart rate. It's lovely going out with my dogs, and it is good for many reasons, but it isn't really kind of getting those mitochondrial improvements that we see from HIIT. And I think then people maybe don't realize, they're not aware of that, so they think, oh well, I'm doing this level of activity, but that's actually low. It's not even moderate activity in any event, right? So it's a big time bleed then if you're trying to optimize all these things. Before we dive into like how we can use certain types of high intensity exercise, let's go a little bit more around the mitochondria and how this works. I think just explaining the difference between improving the way our existing mitochondria are working and then also the creation and renewal of mitochondria would be helpful.
Yeah. So when it comes to mitochondrial health, you can look at slightly different characteristics. One is how many mitochondria you have. One is how what size they have, and then that together would be referred to as mitochondrial density. And the next thing is mitochondrial efficiency, so how well those mitochondria work. And there's maybe a slight variation as to what type of exercise works most or best on those different subfunctions. And so there are some opinions that suggest that a lot of zone 2 training helps with mitochondrial density, and that high intensity training has a more robust effect and stronger effect on mitochondrial efficiency. So making the mitochondria you have work better and harder. Ultimately, you want just the ability. So you want both more, larger, and more efficient. And you measure that. VO2 max is then a kind of compound measurement that assesses, that is a measure of your mitochondrial health, really.
Yeah. When we're looking at mitochondria, we know then that, and from the research, that mitochondria respond to a very sharp stimulus, right? Or strong stimulus, should I say? And that helps with AMPK. And basically, I suppose what we're creating is an environment where we've been almost like threatened, right, by that saber-toothed tiger that's running after us. And now we've survived it. And so our body knows, wow, I better produce a bit of an upgrade here, right, and make you more resilient and stronger. I know that you've developed the Carol bike, an AI-driven bike that helps people get that stimulus exactly right. So it removes the guesswork. Can you describe for us how it works?
Yes, of course. And so you're entirely right. There's so obviously your body is a complex machine. There are complex biological processes. But one that we understand relatively well is that mitochondria respond to what's called PGC1 alpha. That's your body's master regulator for mitochondrial biogenesis. And there are different pathways how to activate PGC1 alpha. One is the AMPK pathway that you've just mentioned. That gets triggered with really short, sharp exercises where you go to very high intensity and you only have to go to it for like a very short moment. And there are other pathways. There's another pathway that's called the calcium channel. There's another molecule, it's CAMK, that can also activate PGC1 alpha. But to activate that pathway, you need much longer training durations and regular contractions. And that's how moderate intensity or low intensity exercise, if you do enough of it, could also have a positive or has a positive effect. But if you ask people why they don't exercise, the number one answer is lack of time. And so what scientists then did, and the academic partners that we work with, like Professor Gibala, he's probably the leading researcher in that field, is that they looked for what is the shortest and simplest and easiest exercise to trigger that PGC1 alpha spike that and activation, and that triggers this mitochondrial biogenesis. And they found that 2 20-second sprints at maximum intensity, that is actually enough to activate this AMPK pathway, to release the PGC1 alpha, and then to lead to the mitochondrial biogenesis and greater mitochondrial health and mitochondrial function. And what we understand, what our academic partners understand, is that it's basically around rapid glycogen depletion. So glycogen is a storage form of sugar. It's stored in your muscles. And when you suddenly, in kind of a short sprint, increase the energy demand very rapidly, your body mobilizes lots of glycogen. And bound to that glycogen is AMP, which gets activated to AMPK, which then triggers that adaptation pathway. And what's really fascinating and great, actually, is it doesn't depend on how many sprints you do or how long those sprints are. What you need to trigger is just the initial glycogen mobilization. Yeah? And that's why 2 20-second sprints are enough to trigger that training stimulus and to basically flip that switch. Really, like a hack, yeah, is that more or longer sprints have been shown to not deliver greater benefits. So you don't have to do 6 sprints, 10 sprints, whatever, 10, 20 sprints. 2 is enough. And they also don't need to be 30, 40, 50 seconds. And in fact, the data shows that you get less benefits if you do more or longer sprints. Because if you do more longer sprints, you pace yourself. You're not going all out anymore. But what we want to achieve is just have very momentarily, so 2 20-second sprints, where you push yourself to your limits. And that just triggers a very, very robust training stimulus. And what the Carol bike does is it takes the guesswork out of that, and it is completely optimized to help everybody to perform these very short and sharp REHIT sprints, they're called, and give you an optimal workout every time. So you don't have to turn any buttons. You don't have to guess what the right intensity or the right resistance is. That's all taken care of for you, and basically takes out all the friction, and so makes it a very simple workout to do, workout to perform, and making it as easy as possible to find the time and to build a habit to really, in a sustainable way, improve your VO2 max and then get all the, quality of life and longevity benefits from it.
What I like is when I'm using it is that it shows me the data as I'm doing it, right? So when I've done that sprint, I can see exactly what my peak wattage was, my power, and then I can see when I start to top off. And it's interesting, isn't it, right? Because you get that ATP release, right, for the first few seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, and then you move into the phosphocreatine system, right, which I think is 8 to 12 seconds. And then you go into that glycogen depletion, and you kind of see it drop off. But I think, so I love the data because also it makes it it gamifies it.
Yeah,
so because
exactly.
It's like, oh, can I get a higher peak power than I did last time?
A little dopamine hit if you've done a good ride.
Exactly. You get a good dopamine hit. And I think that's the thing, is for people listening to this who maybe love going out running, right?
Yeah.
Often they don't like to lift weights because they'll say that, I don't get that same dopamine hit and kind of release of these neurotransmitters and serotonin, endorphins, and all these things, that they come back and get that runner's high. This actually triggers that high, is what I've found, which is what I look for with exercise. And then that becomes, by its nature, positively addictive, right? Because you're like, I want to go back again, I want to beat it, and I want to get that feeling afterwards.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. So you, with those intense sprints, you and again, complex biological processes, but you do get robust release of neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, that are so fundamental when it comes to mood and executive function, cognitive performance. And now, how and why does this all happen? One thought is that it's very much tied to lactate. So these short sprints are, of course, highly anaerobic. You produce a lot of lactate, and lactate gets then transported to the brain and plays an important role in the production and release of neurotransmitters like serotonin, like norepinephrine, and thereby create that response.
Which is also important. So this is a big one for me because I've been looking at, the research that's coming out now around the importance of lactate for long-term brain health protection. And I have Alzheimer's in my family. I carry quite a few different genes that predispose me to that. So the more things that I can do to protect the health of my brain long term, so you're kind of getting those immediate benefits, performance benefits, but you're also protecting not just like longevity in terms of VO2 max, but also ultimately the health of your brain, which is super powerful.
Absolutely. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is another really important, it's a protein. And there's good research that shows that these high-intensity bouts lead to a very robust increase in serum BDNF levels. So that was a New Zealand study that showed 4 to 5 times higher levels of BDNF release after intense sprints versus low or moderate intensity exercise. And BDNF, is essential in keeping your brain young and healthy. It helps with neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, memory formation. So this is with very little time. So you can do these workouts in as little as 5 minutes, and you only have to do them 2 to 3 times per week. You get a raft of benefits from VO2 max and cardiorespiratory fitness to metabolic health, to brain health, to mood, to executive function. It's really in terms of the ROI, what you put in to this in terms of time and effort. Yes, you have to push hard for 220 seconds, but that's a very short moment. And then what you get in return is a really long list of very profound physical, mental health, longevity benefits that make it very, very worthwhile.
Very worthwhile. And I like the way as well, with the way the bike is moving, kind of like adjusting so intelligently, you can't cheat. So it's going to make it hard for you regardless, which is good.
And it makes it, so if you think about what holds people back, like mental load, friction to go out. So yes, the bike is, it's a very safe way of doing it. It's uses AI to personalize the workout. So really, it can be done with by people of all kinds of ages and fitness levels. So this can be by older users, people who are not that well trained, and by elite athletes. So we can really create this optimal workout for every user. But it also creates, it takes away a lot of the friction. So if you have a bike at home, it takes only 5 minutes. You can build a habit on it. It doesn't take a lot of mental load. You really only have to get on it, and then the bike coaches you through it. You don't have to second guess how hard, kind of what resistance. You just follow it, and then yes, when the bike says go, then you have to push, and then you have to push twice hard for 20 seconds. The rest is all very gentle. And so this very low friction and low mental load is actually also very important, because so I do go running every now and then, but I find myself, if I go running, the mental load is actually much higher, because every single step for like half an hour I have to push myself with these these short, so it's called a REHIT, right? Yeah, reduced exertion high intensity interval training. With those 2 20-second sprints, basically as soon as I enter the sprint, I see already the light at the end of the tunnel, and so the mental load is fairly low, and so it becomes a very doable exercise.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important thing because often if you're time poor as well, you don't have time necessarily to plan workouts to see, am I going in the right intensity? And also we know that the thing that holds us back the most, right, is the mental discipline to push as hard as we should. And the bike is doing that. When we look at, you mentioned around this mobilization of glycogen that happens, right? I think it mobilizes 25 to 30% of muscle glycogen, but then it doesn't spike insulin, right? It's a protein, GLUT4 is being activated, and now that is higher for up to 48 hours afterwards. I think from the research, this from a metabolic health perspective is really interesting. Can we dive into that a bit more?
Yes, we can. So so if we had to talk about what are the main benefits, so we've said there's a long list of benefits. Probably the most headline benefits is one, VO2 max and cardiorespiratory health, fitness, and the other headline benefit is around metabolic health, and that's been again. So this is actually very important also to highlight. There's really robust research about that now. There's clinical trials, medical, academic trials that follow really gold standard methodologies. There's been a number of trials, there are meta-analysis. So this is all very well established by now. On the metabolic health benefits, what's used is usually what's called the METS-Z score, which is a compound score. It's a clinical score that takes into account your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, your triglyceride levels, your blood sugar levels, and your waist circumference. And what researchers have found is that in only 8 weeks doing this exercise 3 times a week, so it's 3 times 5 minutes, 15 minutes per week, that you can reduce your risk of developing metabolic diseases by 62%. So it's a remarkable improvement in metabolic health. Yeah, it's highly relevant because so much of our population is either, and it's not just about being overweight or inactive, but metabolically unhealthy and are at a greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And then it becomes obviously a risk factor for so many other diseases like Alzheimer's, dementias, where it's just, it adds to at least the observed risk goes up if you're metabolically unhealthy.
Especially when we think as well, right, around midlife women that are going through that peri to postmenopausal transition. We know that insulin sensitivity reduces, inflammation is rising, they've got cortisol going up. There's a whole load of things, right, that are going on, and their mitochondria are affected. I think this is the other thing is, there's this bidirectional relationship between estrogen and the mitochondria. And so if we can use something that stimulates both the mitochondria, improves VO2 max, and is improving insulin sensitivity, all in what is a very short amount of time. It's a very powerful intervention, lifestyle intervention.
Exactly that. And at the same time, not spiking cortisol. So if you did long endurance exercise, there is indeed a risk that you increase cortisol levels, which then makes it even harder to build or retain muscle. And so the conventional wisdom, or what people think what a workout should look like, is just not the most helpful thing. So if you have a certain amount of time per week for working out, especially as you described, if you're say a woman in that age, you're thinking about perimenopause and you're trying to find an optimal way to use exercise to your advantage, then we believe, and I think that the science and the data points very clearly in that direction, that you should not spend hours on moderate intensity cardio, but rather stack kind of at the bottom high intensity, like something like REHIT, and then use which gives you the benefits we've discussed, and then use the other time to do strength training and try to build muscle or retain muscle as much as possible, because as you've said, that's kind of after VO2 max, that's the next most important predictor of longevity of life expectancy. So if you can get those two covered, you'll have much greater benefits, and you don't get the deleterious effect, the negative effects of long endurance training, which can be counterproductive with high cortisol levels and create some disbenefits and some issues rather than be unequivocally positive.
Ever feel like your hormones are running the show, and not in a good way? One day you're thriving, the next day you're anxious, inflamed, wired but tired, and your cycle feels completely unpredictable. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Hormone shifts, especially in perimenopause, can throw even the healthiest body off balance. For years, I was sailing through perimenopause, training well, eating nutritious food, sleeping like a dream. But about a year ago, things shifted. Practically overnight, my sleep became disrupted. I felt more reactive, my skin started breaking out, and I just didn't feel as resilient. It wasn't really a lifestyle issue. I was doing all the right things, but my hormones were clearly trying to tell me something. That's why I'm so excited to share Hormone Harmony, the latest science-backed formulation from Level Up Health. It's designed to restore balance when your body needs it most, especially in the face of estrogen dominance, androgen imbalance, and cycle irregularities. Hormone Harmony is a clinical strength blend of nutrient cofactors, adaptogens, and next-generation actives designed to help you rebalance estrogen, testosterone, and cortisol, improve insulin sensitivity and metabolic health, support cycle regularity and healthy ovulation, reduce bloating, brain fog and breakouts, calm inflammation, and restore adrenal resilience. Here's a bit more about what's inside Hormone Harmony. There's myo-inositol and D-chiroinositol to restore insulin sensitivity, improve ovulation and cycle regularity, especially for PCOS and androgen excess. NACET, next generation NAC, to boost glutathione, support detox and hormonal clearance. And there's indole-3 carbinol and calcium D-glucarate to promote healthy estrogen metabolism and reduce estrogen dominance. There's also curcuprime bioavailable turmeric extract for powerful anti-inflammatory support, and reishi mushroom and PEA to regulate immune hormonal response and support adrenal health. And then there's SAMe to support mood, methylation, and hormone detox, alongside Glucovantage dihydroberberine to enhance AMPK, regulate glucose, and improve insulin response. Whether you're dealing with perimenopause, PCOS, or feel like stress has hijacked your hormones, Hormone Harmony is your upgrade. And as a podcast listener, you can get 15% off with code Angela at checkout. Head over to leveluphealth.com/Angela to learn more and take the first step back to balance. That's leveluphealth.com/Angela and code Angela to save 15%.
So, I mean, it's pretty powerful, because if you think about it, if you're doing, a couple of hours maybe of resistance training a week, split across sessions that would, however it suits your lifestyle, whether that's kind of 4 30-minute sessions, or you're doing a couple of, 1 hour sessions or 45 minutes. And then you've got this REHIT a few times, which is super efficient, 10 minutes. It's not a big chunk of we all have 168 hours in our week, right? We're just talking here a total to optimize VO2 max and your muscle strength and mass. And obviously the bike's doing the power as well at the same time, right? Helping with the fast twitch muscle fibers.
That
in
is
what,
true.
a total of
Yes.
2-3 hours a week we're looking at for the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the forces that you exert during a REHIT sprint, because you're momentarily pushing to your limits, the forces are also relevant for strength training. And so there's that's unpublished research, and we see it in our own data, that we also get a substantial strength improvement in your lower limbs. So 15% improvement in leg strength. And those are your biggest muscle groups. So it's even for strength, you're doing something really positive for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bonus, isn't it, on top? The other thing that I picked up when I was looking at a lot of the research that you very kindly shared with me on this area was looking at the afterburn effect. So particularly again, when I think of like women like me, we're midlife, there's a change, there's a redistribution of body fat where it's moving from the hip and thigh area into more of the abdominal area. That then can cause its own issues in terms of actually making you more vulnerable to more weight gain, right? Because it's kind of pro-inflammatory and things. From my understanding and reading of the research is that the afterburn effect is very powerful. I think it's like 66% of the calories are actually burned after the ride.
That's correct. Yes. So you can, again, that's independently verified by or researched by some of our academic partners. That was done at Western University in Colorado, where people first did the REHIT sprints with a gas exchange analyzer that they wore then for several hours afterwards. And so you can then measure what's the additional calorie consumption above rest that you get in the hours after the workout. And so the REHIT workouts, those 2 20-second sprints, they're so short that during the workout, you're burning relatively few calories. So much so that you don't, like, your body temperature doesn't go up that much that you sweat a lot. So most people don't even sweat. But then in the 90 to 120 minutes after the exercise, you have a pronounced, and that's called EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, where your calorie consumption is substantially higher, and you get then actually a very helpful if weight management is also important to you. You get a meaningful calorie burn from a very, very short workout. And that's maybe it's actually helpful because sometimes people think, oh, zone 2 training, that's done at a level of intensity where your body is metabolizing mostly fat. So it's really, if you did it perfectly, you would dial in the point of maximum fat oxidation. And then people hear that and think like, oh, fat oxidation, I burn more fat. That's going to help me with weight loss. But that's unfortunately not true, because your body is perfectly capable of dynamically regulating and using different energy sources. And if you do a short sprint, that's highly glycolytic and anaerobic. So where you burn through your storage forms of sugar, your body is still able afterwards in that epoch to oxidize fat and to basically burn through a substantial amount of calories. And so if you hear zone 2 training, it's great for burning fat. No, it's not. It's obviously not just about calorie ins and calories out, but that is an important equation. And just because you're using fat for fuel at a specific point in time or glycogen for fuel at another time, that doesn't mean that one is more helpful for weight loss than the other.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception, right? And that when you're burning fat during a workout, you're using fat as a fuel, but then a lot of it is re-esterified and restored as fat. And it's really, as you say, comes down more about what your nutrition and what you're eating.
Yes.
Whereas this is now improving that calorie burn, just like when you gain more muscle tissue, right?
Yeah.
You're depositing in your health bank account and you're improving your metabolic rate outside of those workouts. REHIT is doing the same thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. She's very powerful combo. I think that for people listening to this, what I found really helpful though is if you want to do zone 2 or you want to do some of the other like science-backed protocols, for example, like the Norwegian 4x4 that we hear a lot about, talked about, and I've mentioned as well on this show, is there are protocols for that. So you can go in and actually set it to the Norwegian 4x4 and then it will provide the right amount of resistance. If you want to do a zone 2 ride, you can do that as well and it will help you. I think that that's also makes it really fun, because you've got this whole gamification where you're improving your scores on different things, but you can also kind of choose whatever you want.
Absolutely. And so we got to be a bit careful and we try to be. So we don't say zone 2 is bad or anything like that. The exercise is very good. And any exercise that you enjoy and that you can adhere to is wonderful. And our bike, the Carol bike, is very, very versatile. It's probably one of the most versatile bikes because you can also use it a wide range of third-party apps. So we're not just locked into our app. You can use it with Swift, Ruvi, Peloton Digital, whatever you want. Yeah, whatever we can to optimize, we do. So we Norwegian 4x4s, that's a HIIT workout. It's not a REHIT workout. It's a HIIT workout, but a very effective one. That has been also shown, and is probably the most researched HIIT workout or workout overall, and has been shown to, even with elite athletes, deliver good results in terms of performance improvement. It's very hard. It takes about half an hour, and you're going to be sweat drenched. But if you're looking for the strongest possible training stimulus, and you want to mix it up, and you want to have different things, or you enjoy a hard workout, that exists, then this is a way. And again, you can do first a fitness test, and then the bike will dial it in exactly to help you execute that workout optimally. And we've been talking a little bit about how zone 2 training might not be the first priority for most users. I maintain that we have some great new features coming up that, to my knowledge, will make the Carol bike also the most efficient, effective, smartest tool for zone 2 training, because there's quite compelling research and interesting research came out that one can use higher order analysis of heart rate variability to determine where that lactate threshold actually is, which is usually you'd have to use gas exchange analysis or blood tests, finger prick tests, and that's just not practical for everyday use. But with heart rate variability, that is actually something you can use in every training sessions. And so if you enjoy zone 2, say you do it while you listen to a podcast or an audiobook or your favorite show, then our bike will help you make that workout as good as it could possibly be by helping you dial in the exact right intensity.
Yeah, which is super helpful, because then I think, people can use it for a variety of, whatever they want. I think the other thing that just it kind of tracks back to the REHIT as well is that for many women that I work with, they are short on time. And also we have to the question I get asked a lot is, when do you go in the sauna? Like, when do you do that? Because there's a whole thing for women around like hair and makeup when you're really sweaty. And I think the thing about the REHIT bit, just to track back to that, is not only is it short, but you don't really sweat. So if you want to use it as a way of getting a movement break during your day, in between meetings, like if you're home working, I have it in my home office right here. So I can just jump on it. It's very easy, and I can still record a podcast, and I don't have to go like rewash my hair. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that works for most people. We don't promise that it works for all. So let's say 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 won't have that. We come across the odd person who, I don't know, has just a natural propensity to sweat a lot, and they manage to heat up with a short sprint then in any case. But most people don't. Yes, that's right.
Can we talk about some of the other features on it? Because I find these to be quite fun, because this is where it allows you to gamify things. So first of all, VO2 max testing. I don't do it as regularly as I should, because actually it's a bit of a pain, and it's not a pleasant experience going and having a mask put on and actually really measuring your VO2 max. You have a protocol on the bike where you cycle. I think the whole thing takes around 8 minutes. And you can assess with reasonable accuracy, you can dive into the details of it, someone's VO2 max.
That's right. So our bike is in fact used by many kind of performance studios or so to do the VO2 max testing with a gas exchange analyzer. So there are specific protocols that you can do while wearing one of those masks with an analyzer on it to determine very, very precisely what your VO2 max is. But that's a very hard test because you have to, so the power, the intensity gets gradually ramped up to absolute exhaustion. So you have to push until you can't anymore, and then some more. So that makes it a very hard test. And to be honest, it's like while the gas exchange device analyzers are super precise, whatever plus minus 1% or so, what we found and what our academic partners find, if they do repeat testing, just user behavior, because it's so hard to push really to your absolute limit, brings in actually quite a bit of variabilities. And so in the best studies where we show kind of what was the training benefit from before and after, they do 2 tests before, 2 tests after to bring down the variability that just comes from user behavior, despite the analyzers being super accurate. Now, an alternative to that, and much, much easier to do, is what we call, it's a submaximal VO2 max test, which is 8 minutes. And you're basically on the bike 4 minutes with a fairly low intensity, and then another 4 minutes with a moderately high intensity. And we observe then the heart rate response to that and how much your heart rate increases from what is similar to rest to then this moderately hard load, and can then estimate quite precisely what your VO2 max is. And so scientific studies have shown, so this was developed in I'm not sure now, I think it's Norway. It's called the Ekblom-Buck test. And this is always very nice. Researchers publish it, and if we can implement it, we implement it. And with that is actually is a really good thing, that research shares those things. And so that Ekblom-Buck test gives an estimate around like plus minus 10%. And yes, that's less precise than gas exchange analysis. But at the same time, you take the variability that comes from user behavior out of the equation, because it's a very simple test to perform. So you don't have to push to your limit. You just do those 4 minutes at low and 4 minutes at higher intensity. And thereby you get a really good estimate with relatively low effort of your VO2 max. It is similar. So people will have their Apple Watch or their Garmin that also gives them VO2 max estimates. And the methodology is similar in that those would also look at, as you go running, for example, they estimate your power output and then measure your heart rate and estimate your VO2 max. So there's 2 levels of estimation in there. What we can do on our bike is we measure your power output, we measure your heart rate, and then estimate your VO2 max with the best available methodology. And so have only 1 level of estimation, which should make it that bit more reliable and precise than you might get from your Apple Watch or from your Garmin.
And you can test it multiple times, right? It's
Absolutely.
easier than going to a lab, and you're always using the same thing as well, which also improves the reliability, right? Because
Correct.
you're on the same bike, doing the same
Correct.
protocol. As you say, there's like less kind of user margin,
And
or kind of any errors.
even with so when you do the REHIT rides, those really short sprints, you also we after each ride you get a basket of metrics that makes it quite gamified and gives you that little dopamine hit when you get a good score or good scores. And one of the metrics is your fitness score, and that uses a similar principle. So that's again your heart rate response to those short sprints, and then how quickly your heart rate recovers after the sprints. Now, it's not the same as VO2 max, because it's those VO2 max is maximum ability to burn oxygen in an aerobic exercise. Those sprints are highly anaerobic. So it's really not the same, but we've designed it so that it follows, that it tracks your VO2 max. And so you can have a high level of confidence if your fitness score goes up by 10%, that you will also see if you do repeat VO2 max testing, that you get the equivalent benefit in terms of VO2 max increase.
Oh, interesting. So just to clarify, so the fitness score is based around how quickly your heart rate, which is an important metric in itself, right? How quickly it comes back down after you've exerted. And then if you see your fitness score improve by a certain percentage, that would likely be reflected by the same percentage increase in VO2 max. So it's a good way of keeping track,
And
even if you're going into a lab in between.
On average, because we've designed it that way, we're highly confident that it tracks it. Obviously, for individuals, there can be a greater level of variability. There's very clearly, but on average, the fitness score has been designed to track VO2 max improvements. And so our bikes are now, I've counted the other day, we have by now 7 peer-reviewed studies. So there's lots of studies on REHIT, but 7 studies that have been done with our bikes. The leading researchers like Professor Gibala, like Professor Dalick, Professor Astorino, they're using our bikes for their research now, because it is a very convenient and user-friendly way to administer this type of workout. The alternative would be research equipment that's a lot more expensive and just a lot less user-friendly. And so that's very helpful for us and validates our claims, and that's a very good cooperation that we've got going there.
Yeah, the fact that you've done studies, as you say, with people like Professor Kabbalah and the others, I think we can link to that those studies in the show notes. So for anyone listening who wants to go and dive deeper, they can go into those. The other thing I like is that you can measure your wattage, so you can see your power at its peak, and you can also do things like a power test based on, for example, like how many watts you can produce at the top of your zone 2, which is a really good, both of those are very good like markers of mitochondrial health. And so like people can track that, right? And they can work on their mitochondria if they're lower.
Yeah, exactly. Or cyclists, they love to know their functional threshold power, their FTP. And so we've got tests that help you determine that, and then workouts that kind of have their training zones based on FTP. So if you want to train specific aspects, you have all the options there.
From what you've been saying as well, Ulrich, there's some exciting changes coming in. Like you mentioned, this way of using heart rate variability for also predicting zone 2 and things like that. These changes basically get downloaded through their software, do they, for the user? So you're always getting the latest upgraded version of the bike.
That's, exactly right. So we have, our bikes have the like remote management capability, and we publish software updates every 2-3 months. Partly that's responding to user feedback. If people find certain things work better than others. We have a very engaged user base that provides us with lots of improvement suggestions, and we try as best as we can to implement that. And the other thing is, because we're working with the leading researchers in this field, and we're keeping an eye out for what new research is available, because we have these connected product, and we if there is new science and new research and something that's we find exciting and that's helpful and effective and efficient, we'll implement it and load it onto the bike. And so it's not just a static product that you buy that's it is what it is now and it either works or it doesn't. No, it is also a product that evolves, and as the science develops, it gets better, and as we get more feedback, it gets better.
Yeah, which is really exciting. And I love the fact that because you've got so many, like thousands of users, you have so much data. So you can actually benchmark yourself in terms of your fitness, right? Both against your age and also like what the average like member in your age group is getting.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something really that sets us even apart from, so as I said, we are working with the leading researchers in this field. And we were very happy. So Professor Gibala, he published, this is 2-3 months ago, a study that was really the most rigorous, deploying all the gold standards for trial design, setup, analysis, like double-blind randomization, and this and that. That these studies were done on our bikes. So that's very positive. When they do those studies, so then it's 50 participants for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. You collect data of hundreds of workouts. Yeah, and that's of course meaningful. And if you design it carefully, you can do statistical analysis that are very meaningful. And because you control it all, our academic partners are able to draw important conclusions from this. We have millions of rides from tens of thousands of users. So that gives us just a different quantity of data, like really several orders of magnitude higher, that lets us do some things that our academic partners couldn't do. And one of them is, for example, the AI personalization, and how do we have to calibrate the workouts? How do we have to set the resistance for each individual to achieve their optimal performance, to achieve their maximum intensity, and then get basically the most efficient, most effective workout out of that. And if you have that much data, you can run, we use reinforcement learning. You can run sophisticated analysis, AI over it, and use it to create something that would be hard to replicate in academic trial that didn't use our bikes, for example.
And the average improvement in VO2 max, right, for someone who is kind of beginning to focus on cardiorespiratory fitness, I think is it 12% for a woman on average, 15% for a man?
Correct. So we see 12% in the first 8 weeks. And so that's already a very profound improvement. Yeah? If you think about something that's more important than body weight, if you lost 12% of body weight, you'd be, like many people, would be unrecognizable. So it's a very, of such a fundamental health marker, that's already a very, very substantial, significant improvement. But it doesn't stop there. So the longer academic trials have shown that then if you go up to 20 weeks, you see around 20% improvement. And when we look at our user data, this continues further. So it's completely, I mean, not everybody gets like 30, 40, 50% improvement, and it depends on your starting position. But over 6 months, over a year, we do see those improvements, which, that's...
Of what did you say? 40 to 50% improvements over 6 months to 12 months?
30, 40, 50%, yes. That's so...
When you think about it declines by around 10% per decade,
yes.
Think about in 6 months what improvement you are collapsing, like you're getting younger, like
in many ways
cardiovascularly younger,
and certainly more capable and more, you're just functioning at a higher level. My personal, and this shames me a little bit because it also tells something about where I've started from. So I've increased my VO2 max by over 50% from when I started, and objectively measured by gas exchange. So yes, my fitness score improved by that much, but also through kind of verified with gas exchange analysis. So I started with a VO2 max kind of in the mid 30s and got to one that's comfortably in the 50s. And so from a relatively mediocre performance, I went to sitting very, very comfortably in the highest band for my age. So I'm 48 now. And that's achieved through very, very little time with Carol Bike and those REHIT rides. I say it shames me a little bit because, when I started, I wasn't. I wasn't in great shape. Yeah, so I had a lot of things that I could make up. But I mean, it's remarkable, and that's something you. It's very noticeable. That's something you feel. You don't need metrics to feel that difference.
Yeah, you feel it, and you know that also you're really protecting your health. I'm excited just to get back on it after speaking to you, because I love doing it. There's so many ways, right, to use it. You can do time efficient workouts, the REHIT, really like proven by science, and as you say, by some of the most preeminent researchers are working on the bike and updating it and refining it all the time, but also just validating it through peer-reviewed studies. And then if people want to do their zone 2, they want to just free ride, right? Put some music on, put it in front of the TV. You can do that too. You can do the Norwegian 4x4. All of those, which I think, and then you set yourself some goals and benchmark it against other people. To find out more, carolbike.com. And I think you have a discount for listeners with my name, with Angela, special discount. Thank you for offering that to everyone listening. So if you're excited to go and check it out, go to carolbike.com and use code Angela. Is there anything we haven't covered, Ulrich, that you feel we should have covered here?
One thing, maybe, if so, we've made some pretty big claims. This is all very, very grounded in science, and the data is there. So do go to our website, have a look at the science. There's links to the papers. You know, funny enough, we get now more and more when people ask, "How did you hear about it?" People say like, "Oh, ChatGPT recommended your product." So if people want to have a look at that, ask ChatGPT about REHIT, about Carol Bike, whether it might be. If you prefer to talk to a person, we have a team of fitness advisors. They have masters in exercise physiology who can have schedule an appointment with them, can have a personal discussion, whether it's the right thing for you, how to use it, and they can give you good advice. And the last thing is we do offer, I think, a industry-leading what we call risk-free trial. So if you decide to purchase a bike, you have 100 days to see whether you like it, whether you can stick to it, and whether you can see and feel the benefits. And if it's not, then our returns policy is such that you can just give it back. We'll pick it up. And so that gives you, I think, overall a good level of reassurance if you want to take that leap and see what it's like. And once you've tried it, seeing is believing. So all the research is great, but kind of experiencing firsthand is most important. We're quite confident that it's a very, very efficient and effective way to improve so many aspects of health and fitness.
Yeah, amazing. And you can try it out for 100 days and get those 12 or 15% improvements in VO2 max. That's awesome. And I love the fact your team was so helpful for me when I first got started on it. Super helpful. It's been amazing. So thank you so much, Ulrich. Thank you for coming back on the show. We will link to all of that in the show notes so people can go check it out.
Thank you so much.